There is another issue, Mr. Vice President, that breaks my heart and breaks the heart of the nation, and it's the issue of Puerto Rico.
I've spent more time there than you have.
I spent a lot of time there, Mr. Vice President, but I know you've been there a lot, and it's an element of resilience, it's an element of hope. Seeing the Puerto Rican people in the front lines fighting all these horrible issues, from Hurricane Maria to the earthquakes that we have seen, to all the political issues, to the disrespect of this administration throwing paper towels at them instead of providing the support that our brothers and sisters in the island need. If you become president, what are you going to do to make sure Puerto Rico recovers, that this never happens again in the island of Puerto Rico, and that the middle class is strengthened because of workers' rights have also been under attack in the island?
A number of things. Look, I've been deeply involved with Puerto Rico for a long time. Initially, it's the largest portion of the Spanish-speaking population in my state, the state of Delaware, New Jersey, New York, significant large Puerto Rican populations. Let's start with what this guy doesn't even know, meaning the president. Puerto Ricans are American citizens. They are American citizens, number one. I've been to the island many, many, many times because the Third Circuit Court of Appeals is the same as Delaware. We're the same. Anyway, I've been there a lot. Here's the situation. Today, if I were president, I would be having the head of FEMA in Puerto Rico making an assessment of the damage done by this earthquake, these earthquakes, and I would be surging all the help that was needed on that island as if it happened anywhere else in the United States of America. If this happened, what do you think would happen if this happened down by one of his nightclubs, his golf clubs? No, I'm serious. What do you think? We should treat it no differently than any other American city, any other American state, any other American property. We should be surging to help there, number one. Number two, what we did in our administration and what I did as senator and the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee as well as Judiciary Committee is we significantly increased the tax opportunities for tax relief for Puerto Ricans by providing opportunities to bring into Puerto Rico significant middle-class jobs. And let me define what I mean by middle class. I don't mean $15 an hour. I mean be able to make $45 an hour. I mean be able to form unions. I mean be able to be in a position where you have health care, where you have wage protection beyond that. And being middle class is, the way I define it, it's not a number, it's an idea. It's about being able to own your home and not rent it if you want to own. It's about being able to send your kid to a local public high school, and if they do well, know they can go on to college, and they can figure out how to go to college, you can figure out how to pay for it. It's about being able to take your geriatric mom home when your dad dies and hope you never have to count on your children to take care of you. It's about a little bit of breathing room. And the middle class is getting killed, not just in Puerto Rico, and not just among Latinos, across America. You have, for the first time, we're no longer the wealthiest middle class in the world. No longer. You have, for the first time, a majority of people in the middle class arguing that their children will never have the same standard of living they have. And let me tell you why the middle class is so important. Every other country in the world, I know I'm referred to, as my colleagues will tell you, as middle-class Joe. That's how they always talked about me when I was in the Senate and even in the administration. Well, it's not because that they think I'm not sophisticated. Well, I'm pretty damn sophisticated about what built this country. What built this country wasn't Wall Street, it was middle-class folks, and the union movement built the middle class. That's how it happened. No, for real. Wall Street didn't build America. I wasn't as poor as a lot of folks maybe in this district, but I tell you what, when my father finally got a job after a couple years from when we got from Scranton, we moved into a 3-bedroom split-level house with 4 kids and a grandpop. It wasn't an unsafe neighborhood, but it wasn't. We were, I guess, technically lower middle class. But from the time I was born, and even though I used to stutter badly as a kid, my father and mother looked at me and said, you can be anything you want, anything you want. There's not a thing that you can't do. And I really mean it. Well, think about it. How many parents go back to their old neighborhoods? How many parents are saying that to their kids now? They don't think they're going to be able to do it. And look, the reason why we've been the most stable nation in the world, the reason why we've been a nation that's been able, when other democracies have teetered, when there's been great depressions or great wars, is because the middle class provided hope. Everybody thought there's possibilities. I spent more time with Xi Jinping, the head of China, than any world leader had. And I'm in a town called Chengdu, a multi-million people on the Tibetan Plateau. And he turns to me in the 25 hours of dinners we had together, because the President Obama wanted me to get to know him, not we could become buddies, but just to understand his motivation. And he was vice president, and I was vice president. It wasn't appropriate for the president to spend that much time. And he looked at me and he said, with an interpreter whispering in my ear, I apologize, my colleagues have heard this before, whispering in my ear the translation, as he has one whispering in his ear for me when I speak. And he said, can you define America for me? I said, yeah, one word, possibilities. We have believed anything is possible in America, anything, if we do it together. We give people a chance, we thought anything is possible. And we're losing that sense. If we lose that sense in America of possibilities, everything changes. Everything changes. And guess what? You are the possibilities for this country now. Now.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. And as Mi Familia Vota, we just want to send a very strong message of solidarity with Puerto Rico. Estamos con ustedes y vamos a hacer todo lo posible como institución para movilizarnos, para apoyarlos y para asegurarnos que hacemos todo lo posible para que tengamos mejores políticas y estar siempre en solidaridad con esta bella isla y esta gran gente que tanto admiramos. Son un ejemplo de resiliencia. Muchas gracias por todo lo que hacen. Mr. Vice President, we have so many issues, and it's important for us that we hear from the community. So we're going to call off a couple of people.
Let me add one more thing about Puerto Rico.
Yes, sir.
My wife headed the World Children Program for the United States. She had hundreds of workers in Puerto Rico during the hurricane. She spent time down there trying to mobilize people to make sure that they get treated with some dignity. And they weren't. They weren't treated with dignity. And a lot of people left behind. But I want to tell you something. Not only caring about, but getting engaged with, letting people know that you care matters a lot. My wife spent a lot of time in Puerto Rico going back to thank all the Save the Children workers, which is one of the largest children's organizations in the world.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Now we're going to hear from the audience. We have Maria Nieto. She's a student from Las Vegas. Maria.
Okay. Hi, my name is Maria Nieto Orta, and I'm currently the Civic Engagement Organizer for Mi Familia Vota here in Nevada. I have been living in Las Vegas since I was 1.5 years old. I am not a citizen, I am undocumented, and I have the privilege of having some sort of protection under the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, also known as DACA. Education is just as important as immigration, and it is an intersectional issue for the whole community. Access to quality education is a top priority, and some students get charged out-of-state tuition and some even international fees. And I know you just mentioned that. So Vice President Joe Biden, we are asking you to increase access to quality education like you just stated not too long ago, like maybe 30 minutes ago, and to make sure we have full inclusion with no barriers to a society we contribute so much to. So my question to you is, how can you ensure that at a federal level that DACA recipients aren't charged with the out-of-state tuition for states they reside in? And if you can't do that at a federal level, how can you work with states to fix that policy?
We can incentivize states to fix the policy. We can't dictate they do, but what we can do is make sure that if you're in college, you have access to every single federal program that's available, including everything from the Pell Grants to other actions that are other opportunities available, and including student loan forgiveness nationally, and including a whole range of issues that you would qualify for that is you're questioned on now, if in fact we're going to do that. So, for example, if you're in school and you're now in a situation where you may find it difficult to maintain your room and your board or your travel back and forth, you would qualify for $12,000 per year directly to allow you living expenses and travel expenses and rooming expenses. That can fundamentally change the circumstance for you and your family and all other people who, in fact, are DACA qualified now. They'd be able to have that. Secondly, we can, in fact, incentivize states by saying we will provide more funding for other aspects of your education system if you will, in fact, treat DACA students like every other student in state and do not charge them out-of-state tuitions. Wherever their official residence is, they can name where they live, the address they live at. That is what, in fact, you should treat them as. Now, if you're going to go from here to a great university like the University of Delaware, you'll be charged out-of-state students. I'm joking. But all kidding aside, in-state students should be charged, no matter whether they're DACA or they are already citizens, the same exact tuition that would be charged for each of them. But again, and if you, in fact, right now, as everybody knows, by the way, community colleges, all the credits you have at community college are transferred to a four-year college. You can cut in half the cost of your education. Cut it in half. Secondly, there's a program that you're probably familiar with, although you may not need it, that in fact where it relates to student debt. Right now, you have to pay back 10% of your disposable income if you qualify for the program, which you would qualify for. I cut that to 5%, which means that from the time you graduate, if you're making less than $25,000 a year when you start, you pay nothing back until you make more than that. If you do, then you pay back not 10, but 5% of your disposable income. Sorry this goes into detail, but the detail matters. You have 5% of your disposable income. That means after you pay your rent, your house payment, your car payment, your food, everything, you pay only 5% back. But if you engage in a voluntary organization, you can have all your debt forgiven. So if you decide to do everything from doing what you're doing now, all the way through to joining the Peace Corps or working for a violence women's shelter or dealing with or school teaching, et cetera, you can have up to $10,000 a year written off your student debt up to $50,000, and you pay nothing at all for your education. There's a lot more, but he's getting frustrated, so I won't go any further.
Let's take another question,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Vice President. From Xochitl Mendez. She works here in Las Vegas at the hotel industry. Xochitl. We have a mic coming.
Oh. Hi.
Hello.
Nice to meet you. Mi nombre es Xochitl Méndez.
No, the whole question.
Mi nombre es Xochitl Méndez y trabajo para la industria hotelera y soy miembro de una unión. Las latinas somos las trabajadoras que tenemos la brecha salarial más grande. Solo hacemos 54 centavos por cada dólar que hace un hombre blanco. También sufrimos de muchos abusos laborales y ha habido un incremento drástico en el acoso sexual contra las latinas e inmigrantes. ¿Qué políticas exactamente piensa implementar para parar la explotación laboral por las mujeres?
I'll be doing the translation. The question is, Latinas are the workers with the largest wage theft. We only make 54 cents for every dollar a white man makes. We also suffered from labor abuses, and there has been a dramatic increase in sexual harassment against Latinas and immigrants in the workplace. What policies are you planning to implement if you become president to stop the exploitation against women's workers?
A number of things, some of which I've already done. If you are a person who is undocumented and you are harassed, engaged in what, sexual violence or sexual harassment, you are, under the law I wrote, the Violence Against Women Act, allowed to report that to law enforcement, and or go to a violence against women shelter and they report it. And you cannot be deported for doing that. They cannot allow, as a consequence of that, identify you as undocumented and be deported. That is a safeguard built in the legislation I wrote, number one. Number two, what I do is I significantly increase the prospect of you being able to join a union. For example, if you have the Farida brothers and Station Casino that you've negotiated, that they've had a union that has been certified, but not negotiate with them, you in fact, I make sure that we fundamentally change and go after them for violating the law, for not being engaged. And there's two pieces of legislation. I won't bore you with it because you'll get upset and it takes a long time. But there's a thing called the PRO Act, and there's a thing called, anyway, there's two pieces of legislation we can pass. Been passed in the House, and if we get 151 in the Senate, we'll pass it in the Senate as well. That says that if they, in fact, make it difficult for you to, the union to organize, then they can be fined heavily and personally. And if they engage in the inability of you to be able to cast a vote to join a union, they can, in my view, be held criminally liable. That's what I want to see happen. And the fines are $50,000 and $100,000, but it should not be to the corporation. It should be them personally. Do you want? Is this going to be translated again? I'm sorry.
Yeah, we got it, though. We got
Okay,
it.
all right. All right. He won't give you the whole thing, but I will later. But all kidding aside, what's happening is that we have to improve. The only one way to deal with the abuse of power is to have power. And the only people who can take on the abuse of power, if you work in the industry that is, for example, you work at a hotel, is unions, the only ones that have enough power to respond. And so I make it, there's a whole lot of things I do, and I'm a union guy. And matter of fact, my staff just organized with the Teamsters. The staff that works for me just organized with the Teamsters. But my point is that you've got to have power facing power. Otherwise, we get no respect. They don't treat us with any respect. Thirdly, I think that I have been trying since 1973 as a senator, and I think we can get it done now. Finally, people are realizing it. We should pass the Equal Rights Amendment to the Constitution of the United States Amendment, the United States Constitution. I mean, for real. Because all the rest of the way they're getting around a lot of the things we're doing here. We can do that and establish a principle. Look, I believe we're at a moment in American history, we're at a real inflection point. We've been there, probably the last time was during the Civil Rights Movement with Johnson, and before that, when being in a situation with labor all the way back to Roosevelt. We're in another one of those inflection moments. People have realized the extent of the abuse that exists across the board in many ways from corporate America. In addition to that, I think that what we have to do is we have to focus on the notion that we're going to change the culture of violence against women. In America, when I wrote the Violence Against Women Act, the women's groups didn't even support it initially because they thought it would take away from the issues related to choice and gender. Okay, and then they finally came around and everybody, but here's what I said at the time. Women who find themselves the victim of abuse, whether it's if they're married or a boyfriend or a stranger, under the law, you can't, well, what happens is we have to, you all know what in the English language, don't know how it translates in Spanish, what the rule of thumb means. The rule of thumb comes from English jurisprudence, from England. It's not some non-European notion. It came from our system. It didn't come from Africa or China. It's ours. And it said back in the late 1300s, women were viewed as a chattel, no different than the pigs or the horses or the farm animals. And they're responsible for their husbands. So a husband was able to chastise his wife, beat his wife. But so many women were dying from being beaten. The English common law changed in the last 1300 and said a man could no longer strike a woman with a rod bigger than the circumference of his thumb. Now think of that. It was all right to beat you as long as it wasn't going to kill you. This is a cultural problem. We have to change the culture. No man has a right to raise the hand of a woman or a child for any reason whatsoever other than self-defense. Zero. And we've got to now stay at it. We've got to now stay at it. You know why they haven't reauthorized my Violence Against Women Act in the Senate so far? Because although I built in every year it has to be something has to be reauthorized, we build in, with the help of the people here, we build in a provision saying that if you're convicted of abusing a woman, or you have a stay-away order, you get an order saying you can't go near her, you cannot own a weapon at all. But there's an exception that I tried to close. We tried to close this last time. It's called the boyfriend exception. If you just had a boyfriend, you didn't live with him, you didn't have a child by him, he, in fact, was not required to have imposed on him a prohibition of being able to own a weapon. Well, guess what? The NRA is holding up the whole Violence Against Women Act now, because these guys are in the pocket of the NRA and the gun industry. Folks, more women die because someone shoots them to death. Shoots them. And the idea that if you had a boyfriend who beat you up several times and the court says you can't go near that woman again, why in God's name should they ever be able to have a weapon? Period. So we got to change the culture.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I got the signal from your staff that you need to run out to another meeting. We appreciate the time. We had questions on climate change, on education, healthcare, environment, other so critical issues. I know at some point we're going to be able to get to them with your campaign. But we're going to welcome some closing remarks from you, Mr. Vice President. With this campaign, we need to make sure that whomever is the next president is fully committed to protecting and advancing the serious issues that we're facing in the Latino and the immigrant community. We're literally being killed with hate and violence being promoted from the White House. Hate crimes against our community increased 26% since the last 3 to 4 years because of all this hate and all these crimes. And that also is reflected in the policies that are being advanced in the nation. So the road to the White House is through the Latino community. We, in Mi Familia Vota, and all the Latino organizations in the community, we're gonna make sure that we mobilize in historical numbers to pick the right person. But if you become president, we hope to be working very closely with you to make sure that we have a better and more inclusive democracy, Mr. Vice President. With that, if you want to offer some closing remarks, thank you.
Folks, I just ask you to judge me on my record. It's a completely open book. Judge me on my record. Find me anything that we've ever done that I've been inconsistent with what I've said. I believe that we can cover every single person in America with health care, adequate health care and mental health care. We're going to significantly increase the number of health care clinics, mental health care clinics that exist in this country. We're going to invest billions of dollars in infrastructure, $100 billion of that being repairing schools that are in disarray, schools where the drinking water is not pure, schools where they still have asbestos and other things in the walls, schools where the windows leak energy, schools where there are a lot of schools in America, usually schools particularly affecting African Americans and Hispanic Americans. Number 2. Number 3, I guarantee you that everything that I have done, and again, look at my record, has been about preventing the abuse of power, no matter where it is. Look at the hate crimes that have gone up against Jews in America. It's increased exponentially. More Jews have been killed in the United States of America because of their religion than any time in American history. More Jews have been killed. You see what's happening in the black community. It's gotten worse, not better, in a whole range of communities. You see what's happening, for example, I've just been endorsed by the AAPI, the Asian American and Pacific Islanders organization because I've worked so hard. Of their dreamers, 1.7 million of them are Asian or Pacific Islanders. You are the largest numbers, but I hope, and I believe you will, I have found that you extend the same kind of open arms to Jews, to blacks, to Asians across the country, because we are all one people. We really are. We are. And folks, to me, this is about the future of America. And I'm not just saying that. Go back and look, I've been saying that for 25 years. This is about who we are as a country. We are the most unique country in the history of the world. America is an idea, the only country organized on an idea. The idea is written into our Constitution, our Declaration of Independence. We, the people, in order to form a more perfect union, or we hold these truths to be self-evident. All men and women are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. We've never fully lived up to that, but we have never fully walked away from it. Every generation has opened the aperture wider and wider and wider until this man has come along and he shut it down. Close your eyes and remember the television scenes of those racist and neo-Nazis coming out of a field carrying torches in Charlottesville. Their veins literally bulging with hate, screeching the same anti-Semitic bile that was preached in Germany in the 30s. Same exact words, carrying Nazi banners, accompanied by the Ku Klux Klan and white supremacists. A young woman killed. The president asked, what did he think? And what did he say? He said, there are very fine people on both sides. No president in American history has ever said something like that. Never. Think about it. Look what it's doing to us around the world. We used to lead not by the example of our power. We're the most powerful military in the history of the world. But guess what? And thank you for your service, sir. But we have led by the power of our example. That's why the rest of the world has followed us, and it's being devastated. Let me end on a slightly different note. Look, I guarantee you that if I'm your president, you will never have had a better friend in the White House fighting for equality and dignity of Latinos and all Americans, ever. And let me tell you something, a third thing. When I got elected as a 29-year-old kid, I was labeled, because I was the first Catholic elected in my state, I was this idealistic young Irish Catholic guy who was optimistic. I am more optimistic about America's chances to lead the world and make it better than I have ever been. Ever been. Think about this. Once Trump is out of the way, we have an opportunity to do so much. No country is a patch on our genes, not because they're bad. Think about it. We have more great research universities than any country in the world, and all countries combined. Every major earth-shaking change from science and technology to basic changes has come out of one of those research universities, and the American people own them. Not the government, not corporations, the American people. Our workers, and many in this room are example, are 3 times as productive as workers in Asia. We're the wealthiest nation in the history of the world, and if we invest in our people, we'll remain so. If we invest in our people, we have more capacity here than anywhere in the world because of we're making up a nation of immigrants. Take a look at all those major Silicon Valley places. Guess what? They're run by immigrants who founded them. So folks, I'm so tired of all of us walking around with our heads down, like, what are we going to do? Oh my God, we're in trouble. What's going on? I've met every major world leader in the last 40 years. I've not met one single one who wouldn't trade places with the President of the United States in a heartbeat. In a heartbeat. Trade problems. Take a look at China. I don't wish China ill, but China's got they talk about how China's going to run over us. China has so many problems. You realize they don't have enough water, W-A-T-E-R, for their folks to drink. They're talking about multi-billion-dollar projects to turn around rivers so they can actually find potable water for their people. 30 to 45% of all their land is polluted by cadmium. Their arable land, they can't produce enough crops. More people are going to die in China. This is not a good thing. More people are going to die in China of cancer in the next 10 years than all the rest of the world combined. Hear me? All the rest of the world combined. They put 1 million Muslims, 1 million Uyghurs in essentially concentration camps in the mountains in the West. You see what's happening in Hong Kong. You see what's happening in Hong Kong, and this administration has been silent about it. Ladies and gentlemen, they have more problems than we can contemplate. It's time to remember who we are. This is the United States of America. There has never been one time in our history when we decided to take on an issue together that we've not been able to accomplish it. Not once, not one single time. Ever. So let's remember who in hell we are. This is why did you come in the first place? This is the United States of America. And I'm so sick and tired of us not realizing our capacity, what we can do. We can own the 21st century. We can make the rest of the world better. We can bring back this country in a way that is a new level of progress that we've never seen before. So get the hell up and let's do it. Let's do it. I really mean it. We can do this. And because of you, God bless you all, and may God protect our troops.